A cold mist coils around the ramparts of the crumbling stone castle, snaking through crenellations and wrapping itself around the iron chains that secure the drawbridge. Each droplet clings stubbornly, trembling like the hands of a man who has seen too much yet speaks too little. The wind carries a whisper of memory, of warning, through the gaping archways, and the stones themselves seem to breathe, heavy with the weight of centuries. Inside, torchlight dances along the walls, carving jagged shadows that twist like spirits trapped between the cracks. Every flicker illuminates a story, every shadow conceals one, and the air is thick with the scent of burning resin and the damp bite of stone. Through these shadowed halls, a young king moves silently, his crown too large for the narrow planes of his face, his shoulders burdened with a legacy he barely understands. He brushes his fingers against the carved reliefs of ancestors, monarchs whose victories and failures are etched in stone, whose hands once shaped destinies now forgotten. Their faces watch him with silent scrutiny, their eyes hollow yet accusing. Outside, the distant clatter of hooves echoes over the frozen moat, a sound that carries the tremor of approaching unrest. Above, the mournful cry of ravens punctuates the night, their wings cutting across the moonlight as if to mark the passage of unseen doom. He remembers the scent of spiced wine at banquets, the taste of honeyed bread and roasted meats, and the hollow laughter that accompanied the sealing of alliances. Velvet gloves concealed steel, smiles were sharpened with veiled threats, and every whispered word was a weight pressing against his spine. The young king recalls these moments not with fondness, but with the cold awareness that every promise bore the twin seeds of loyalty and betrayal. In the courtyard, frost blankets the frozen moat, its surface gleaming like shattered glass, reflecting the flickering torches that line the walls. The ice is still, yet it is treacherous, much like the hearts of those who surround him. In the small warmth of his private chamber, a single candle flickers, its flame wavering in the drafts that slither under the heavy oak door. On the worn table lies a rusted key, once belonging to a trusted guard now gone, abandoned in silence. The metal gleams faintly in the firelight, a mute testament to betrayal. He lifts it in his hand, feeling the rough cold of iron, imagining the paths it once opened and the secrets it kept. Every scratch, every tarnished corner tells a story he cannot yet read, yet knows intimately. Outside, the wind rattles the shutters, a restless percussion that seems to echo his own heartbeat, quickening in the quiet moments between memory and fear. He approaches the high window, drawing aside the heavy curtain. Beyond stretches a shadowed forest, the treetops dark against the silver moon. The branches sway in the cold wind, skeletal fingers reaching toward the heavens, whispering of the dangers that wait in the blackness. He feels it then, an almost tangible weight of invisible ropes, binding him to a fate not of his choosing, strung taut by ambition, envy, and the ever-present hunger for power. The scent of iron and wet stone clings to his senses, mingling with the faint aroma of burnt pine from the torches below. Every inhale tastes of history, of kings who rose with the dawn only to fall by nightfall, of battles fought not only on fields but within the minds of those sworn to serve. The corridors behind him murmur with life, courtiers moving like shadows themselves, their conversations soft but charged with tension. Each word carries a double edge, each laugh conceals suspicion. The young king feels their eyes, always watching, always measuring, and he wonders how many of them would strike if the opportunity arose. Duty is preached, loyalty demanded, yet these are brittle constructs, as fragile as the frost upon the moat, cracking at the slightest pressure. He remembers the hush of nights in the barracks, the clinking of chainmail, the unspoken acknowledgement that loyalty can turn like the wind. And somewhere, deep in the castle's heart, the first seeds of betrayal begin to root, silent as the frost forming on the window pane, subtle yet inevitable. The night presses close, heavier than stone, carrying with it the quiet threats of unseen watchers. A raven lands on the battlements, cawing once, long and mournful, then settling into the shadows. Its eyes gleam, unblinking, knowing, as though it has witnessed every treachery that will unfold beneath the moonlight. The young king senses the fragile line between survival and destruction, between the loyalty of a few and the ambitions of many. His mind drifts to those long gone, to the fathers and brothers who fell to swords not meant for them, to the whispered warnings lost in the laughter of feasts. Each memory weighs upon him like a chain, yet also steels him, sharpening his senses against the approaching storm. From the ramparts, he watches the distant horizon, where the first hint of dawn struggles against the black of night. The frozen moat glints, the torches flicker, and the castle itself seems to hold its breath, suspended between what has been and what is yet to come. A whisper of wind curls around him, and with it, the realization that tonight will not pass quietly. The frost on the stones will melt with the blood spilled. The key on his table will open doors better left closed, and the shadows in the hallways will move with purpose. He steps back from the window, the candlelight trembling against the walls, and he knows that every moment from this night forward is a choice, a step into darkness or a grasp for control. The history of kings who fell before him hovers, spectral and relentless, and he senses the first cracks of treachery forming, subtle as frost yet destined to spread. The weight of unseen ropes tightens around him, a reminder that the crown is never just metal, never just jewel. It is a trap, a promise, a burden of all that was and all that will be. And in this stillness, in the silence broken only by the distant cries of ravens and the groan of old stones, he feels the stirrings of what is to come. A night that will erupt in violence, alliances that will shatter, and a kingdom teetering on the edge of shadow and fire. Outside, the mist coils tighter, the iron chains creak, and the castle exhales a long, haunted sigh, as if the stones themselves know that the game has begun. And somewhere, just beyond the reach of torchlight, the first moves of betrayal take shape, invisible yet inevitable, leaving the young king alone with the weight of destiny, the chill of history, and the knowledge that he stands on the precipice of a night that will define him forever. The dawn breaks over the battlement like a wound slowly opening, the sky streaked with the bruised colors of dried blood and ash. Frost clings to the stone like the ghosts of 1,000 forgotten prayers. Silence drapes over the citadel, heavy as a shroud, broken only by the tentative footfalls of servants gliding like shadows along cold corridors. Each step is a whisper, each movement a reminder that even in a palace, fear wears the guise of routine. Within the heart of this frozen fortress, the king sits alone, middle-aged, weathered by years of ceaseless war and the quiet torment of inherited guilt. He folds his hands over a chalice of bitter herbal tea. The bitter steam curls into the air, mingling with the faint, acrid smoke of burned incense. Its fragrance is meant to cleanse, to sanctify, but tonight it carries only the scent of despair. Outside, the wind bites at the walls, finding every crack, every unsealed stone, as though the very air conspires to whisper warnings into his ears. He remembers the council, faces like masks, polite, courteous, all smiles that did not reach the eyes. Eyes sharpened like iron daggers, eyes that had learned to covet, to envy, to betray. He recalls their words now as though they were distant echoes, each syllable a subtle blade cutting through the fragile fabric of trust. And yet he had nodded, had smiled, had swallowed the dread in the quiet hope that loyalty might survive within these walls. Beyond the high battlements, snow falls in thin, spectral sheets, settling on banners that once proclaimed his might. White covers red, silence covers song. A broken lute rests in the corner of the chamber, strings slack, its voice forever silenced. Once it had sung of triumphs, of victories won with sweat and steel. Now it whispers only of absence, of joy extinguished and laughter swallowed by the cold. The king's heart tightens, a vice of knowledge pressing deep. Loyalty can be purchased with gold, with favor, with promises. But trust, the fragile, sacred trust of the soul, cannot. A raven perches upon the highest turret, its glossy black feathers absorbing the pale light like spilled ink, cocks its head, observing, patient, eternal. The bird does not flinch, does not hesitate. It bears witness to secrets hidden in the shadows, to schemes carried out in silence, to alliances stitched with deception. The king watches it too, sensing a reflection of himself. Perched upon the high walls of power, yet alone, and ever vulnerable to the unseen. The sound of iron tools strikes the air. Mason's hammer, chisels biting stone. Each clang a drumbeat echoing through the hollow corridors of the citadel. Each strike marks time, yet it is not the rhythm of construction that haunts the king. It is the rhythm of inevitability, of betrayal to come. He feels it in the marrow of his bones, in the slow tightening of the chest. The stones themselves seem to whisper, warning of ruin, warning of hands once thought faithful reaching for his crown in darkness. He rises slowly, the chill of the stone floor seeping into his feet, the cup leaving a cold circle of condensation upon the wood. He moves to the window, gazing down at the courtyard blanketed in snow, the banners drooping like exhausted spirits. His mind drifts through the corridors of memory. A battlefield where friends fell beside him, their faces pale in the smoke of fire. The fevered nights when prayers were his only companions. The solitude of a throne that commands obedience yet offers no solace. He sees, too, the faces of those who will betray him. Smiles like serrated blades, hands extended in false honor, eyes glinting with the hunger of ambition. The room itself seems to pulse with the weight of foreboding. Shadows gather in corners, thickening where the light cannot reach. The incense smoke twists and coils, forming ghostly figures that vanish when looked at directly, as though the air itself carries the memories of every oath broken within these walls. The king's reflection in the window is faint, almost ethereal, a man trapped between past and future, between hope and despair. Outside, the wind carries the scent of frost and iron, whispering through the battlements and over the snow like a mournful chant. Somewhere, a dog barks in the distance, and it sounds like a cry for warning. He closes his eyes, and in the darkness behind his lids, he sees the tapestry of his reign unraveling. The alliances fraying, the whispers growing bolder, the shadows stretching across corridors, waiting. The raven lifts its wings and calls once, a sound that pierces the silence like a blade through cloth. Its cry is not just the voice of a bird but the omen of what is to come, the herald of decay beneath the frost and stone. The king leans against the window, feeling the cold seeping into his bones, and wonders if the walls themselves remember the betrayals of centuries past, if they can feel the tremor of ambition, the pulse of greed. And yet, within this frozen dawn, there is also a pulse of resolve. He feels it as a low thrum in the chest, a heartbeat that refuses to yield. He knows the path ahead will be treacherous, that each smile may hide a dagger, that each word of counsel could be a shackle. But still he breathes, still he watches, still he waits. The silence is not merely absence. It is a space where strategy, foresight, and endurance take root. In this moment of frozen clarity, he understands that survival is not only of the body but of the soul, that the throne, though threatened, may yet endure if he can outwit the shadows that gather like storm clouds. Snowflakes drift against the window pane, ephemeral and silent. The broken lute lies in shadow, the incense curls faintly in the cold air, and the first rays of a sun begrudgingly climbing over the horizon catch the battlements in a silvered glow. The king exhales, a quiet fog rising from lips pressed together in resolve. He knows the storm is coming, that betrayal will come knocking at his gate, that hands he once trusted may be the first to strike. And yet, in this stillness, he finds a fragile defiance, a momentary clarity. Power is a brittle thing, yet it is not without its guardians. The raven flaps once, soaring into the pale light, and in its shadow, the king senses the vastness of what is to come. The snow continues to fall, each flake a whisper, each landing a soft drumbeat echoing through the citadel. And he knows, as all kings must, that when the first strike lands, when the first oath shatters, he will meet it alone, but not unprepared, not unready to answer the silent summons of duty, vengeance, and the fragile, indomitable heart that has carried him this far. The sun hung low, a bruised orb bleeding through the ragged clouds of an autumn sky, casting the ruined banners of a fallen kingdom in a sorrowful, flickering light. They flapped weakly against the wind, each tattered fold whispering the stories of triumphs long decayed, of oaths made and broken, of crowns lost to the greed of men who wore smiles as masks over their treachery. The young queen moved through the great hall barefoot, the chill of the flagstones biting at the soles of her feet, each step echoing softly against walls that had once resounded with music, with laughter, with the ceremonious pomp of power. Her fingers trailed across the dust of long-forgotten feasts, stirring motes that danced in the golden haze, catching the last embers of sunlight that penetrated the high, arched windows. Each grain of dust was a relic, a witness to the joys and cruelties of those who had once walked these corridors, now abandoned to shadows and memory. Outside, life pressed on, indifferent to grief. The distant hammering of blacksmiths rang like a heartbeat of iron and fire, punctuated by the cries of laborers hauling stone, the scrape of carts over cobblestones, the low hum of conversations conducted in fear and duty. It was a kingdom still awake, yet hollow, its veins coursing with the residue of hierarchy, of law and ritual, of loyalty that had been twisted and betrayed. And amidst it all, the queen felt the absence of her husband as a physical ache, a phantom limb in the cold chambers of her heart. His laughter, once rich and resonant, seemed to linger in the corners, a cruel echo she could not grasp, replaced by the sinister whisper of traitors cloaked in ceremonial robes, smiles drawn tight over sharp intentions, eyes glinting with ambition and malice. Candle smoke curled into the vaulted ceiling, tracing serpentine shapes that mocked her solitude. Shadows flickered over carved stone, over faded tapestries, over the empty throne that had once been the anchor of her world. On a side table, a gilded dagger lay abandoned, its metal dulled with the passage of time, a relic of protection now rendered impotent, a symbol of the betrayal that had hollowed the court. She reached for it, her fingers brushing the cold steel, imagining the warmth of the grip that had once been his, the promise it had once carried. But promises, like banners in a storm, frayed and fell. The dagger remained, a testament to the precariousness of power, the fragility of trust. Stepping into the courtyard, the frost claimed the stone with silent precision. The chill bit her fingers, seeped beneath the hems of her cloak, made the air shiver around her. Even the earth seemed to mourn the loss of its sovereign, the stones remembering the weight of feet that had once commanded armies and courtiers alike. Ravens circled overhead, their wings slicing through the dying light like living shadows, carriers of memory and omen, messengers of a past that refused to release its hold. Every sound, every sensation, from the coarse wool of her cloak to the damp bite of the moat, spoke of impermanence, of a world held together by fragile threads. And beneath it all, She felt the slow, inexorable approach of chaos, a tide of violence waiting to sweep away all remnants of what had been built in blood and oath. The queen paused, listening. The wind carried whispers through the skeletons of once grand gardens, rustling the fallen leaves into small whirlwinds that scuttled across the stone. She could hear the distant cry of a child, a fleeting note of innocence clinging to the periphery of ruin. Each breath was sharp, scented with the wet decay of autumn, with smoke from hearths and forges, with the metallic tang of iron. In that moment, she understood the delicate balance she now occupied, suspended between the living past and the encroaching future, a figure poised on the knife edge of history. Every gesture, every glance, every fleeting heartbeat was a negotiation with survival itself. The court that had been her home was now a labyrinth of suspicion and silence, corridors filled with eyes that watched, whispered, judged. Trust had become a currency rarer than gold, more dangerous than any blade. In the distance, a bell tolled, hollow and slow, marking the approach of evening, a signal that night would bring its own trials. Shadows lengthened, pooling at the feet of broken statues, sliding over fountains where water no longer danced but stagnated, thick with leaves and sediment. The queen drew her cloak tighter, a small comfort against the growing cold, against the weight of her solitude. Memories of her husband's hands, his voice, his laughter, pressed against her mind like the lingering heat of a fire long extinguished. And yet, beneath that sorrow, a quiet resolve stirred. The world had not ended. The kingdom had not entirely fallen. Even as betrayal and death circled, there remained the stubborn pulse of life, of possibility, of the chance to shape what could still be. Her steps carried her to the edge of the ramparts, where the wind tore at her hair and the banners below twisted in frantic dance. The horizon glowed with the last embers of day, a fleeting reminder that even in ruin, there was beauty. Even in despair, there was the faintest promise. She imagined her husband walking beside her, imagined his hand resting on hers, imagined the warmth of loyalty that had once seemed eternal. And she felt in that imagined warmth the spark of defiance. She would not be consumed by the shadows that had claimed her hall. She would not surrender to the silence that sought to erase her. Even in the frost, even amidst the scent of burnt oak and wet leaves, she would stand. Below, the courtyard slumbered in a fragile, uneasy peace. The laborers had finished their day, the hammers had stilled, and the world seemed to hold its breath. Yet she knew that dawn would bring more than light. It would bring reckoning. It would bring the sharp, unyielding reality of ambition and fear, of men and women bound by oath but driven by desire. Every corner of the castle whispered this truth. Power is ephemeral, trust is brittle, and history favors neither the timid nor the mourning. To survive, she would need courage beyond the measure of her grief, resolve sharper than the edge of any dagger left behind in abandoned halls. As twilight deepened, she lowered her gaze to the frost-laced stones, to the river of shadows stretching beyond the walls. Ravens had returned to roost, their cries echoing through the hollow air, a chorus both mournful and defiant. Somewhere, a torch flickered, its light trembling against the encroaching darkness, a solitary heartbeat in the vast expanse of decay. The queen inhaled the cold, the smoke, the silence, and she understood that every sound, every texture, every fleeting shadow was part of a living memory, part of a story that refused to end. She turned back toward the hall, her bare feet pressing into the stone, her cloak trailing behind her like a dark river. In her chest, grief and determination intertwined, a single, unyielding pulse. The banners still fluttered weakly. The wind still carried the scent of ash and frost. And above all, the horizon still burned with the dying light of day. She would walk these corridors, breathe this air, feel the weight of what had been lost, and gather the courage to face the tempest to come. For the night would not wait, and the kingdom, fragile as it was, would demand its queen. Ravens wheeled once more overhead, their black wings casting fleeting shadows over the stone, as if to remind her that memory and fate are never still, that every moment of stillness is but the prelude to the storm. And in that silence, she whispered to the empty air, to the ghosts of the hall, to the memory of her lost husband. We endure, we resist, and we rise again. Moonlight spills over the jagged silhouette of the mountain fortress, slicing through the frost that clings to battered banners like the fingers of ghosts. The wind rattles the iron-studded gates, a mournful whisper that seems to echo the fortress' own lament. Within, the great hall yawns, cavernous and cold, the shadows of fallen chandeliers stretching like dark fingers across the flagstone floor. The king sits slumped upon his carved oaken throne, a figure heavy with the weight of years and regrets, his furrowed brow a map of battles fought, friends lost, and promises broken. Every corner of the hall seems to lean inward, closing around him, as if the fortress itself conspires to remind him that time has turned against him. The air is thick with the mingling scents of wet stone, smoldering torches, and the faint, bitter aroma of parchment ink, the very ink of laws and edicts he can no longer enforce. His hands, once decisive and strong, tremble slightly over the carved arms of his seat. Outside, the distant toll of a bell resonates through the empty streets like the slow heartbeat of a dying city, marking each second that drifts further from his control. He remembers the feasts of youth, long tables heaving with roasted meats, goblets of honeyed wine glinting in the torchlight, laughter ringing louder than any bell. Now, those same halls echo with silence and suspicion, the laughter replaced by the careful footfalls of courtiers who bow with one hand and clutch daggers with the other. Loyalty has become a mask, ambition its hidden shadow. A rusted chain lies discarded by the doorway, a grim relic of imprisonment, both literal and symbolic. He feels it in his bones. The kingdom itself is shackled, bound not by iron, but by fear, rumor, and fragile alliances that could crumble at the softest whisper. Every candle flicker casts dancing shadows that resemble phantom traitors, circling, waiting. A lone owl cuts through the night, its cry brittle, cold, and watchful, reminding him that every weakness, every hesitation, is noted by eyes that lurk unseen. He leans forward, pressing his palms to the rough carved throne, feeling the grooves of the wood dig into his skin like the memory of every decision that failed him. There is a clarity to the fear now, a terrifying awareness that the peace he once commanded is an illusion, a brittle veneer over a court brimming with plots. In the corridors beyond, whispers crawl like snakes, sliding over stone floors, entering ears that trust nothing, not even the pulse of their own blood. The king can sense the tide of betrayal rising, slow and deliberate, each moment a drop feeding the coming flood. Through a narrow window, moonlight strikes the banners again, their tattered edges flapping against cold stone, shadows stretching like claws. He recalls the faces of those he once trusted, generals whose swords saved kingdoms, ministers whose counsel guided him through famine and fire. Now their eyes dart with calculation, measuring the worth of alliances, weighing gold against honor, plotting for when the throne is empty. The sound of distant footsteps echoes through the hallways, uneven and deliberate, as if the fortress itself is breathing in sync with the kingdom's anxiety. The king closes his eyes briefly, feeling the chill seep through his robes, settling in the marrow of his bones. He remembers nights of laughter and warmth, of the crackle of hearth fires and the soft murmurs of children whose faces are now shadows in memory. Each recollection sharpens the sting of the present, Empty halls, the weight of parchment, the rusted chain. A shiver runs through him, not from cold, but from the truth that history will not wait for mercy. Betrayal comes as steadily and silently as frost spreading over a sleeping river, and he can see it forming now, just beyond the reach of torchlight. He whispers to himself, almost inaudibly, the names of those who have held his trust, feeling the syllables break against the echoing walls. The fortress listens, or so it seems, and in the silence that follows, he senses the approach of the inevitable. Torches gutter in the corners, casting trembling light on the stone walls, and with every flicker, he imagines hands reaching from shadows, knives sliding along the cold stone. The chains of loyalty, once forged in blood and oath, now hang thin, ready to snap. Outside, the wind carries the scent of smoke from distant fires, a warning or a promise. He cannot tell which. The tolling bell continues, a dirge for the lineage that teeters on the brink. Memories of victory and valor clash with the fear of what comes next. Flames consuming the streets, the cries of subjects betrayed, the echo of a crown falling into treacherous hands. The weight of the fortress presses in from all sides, and he feels the fragility of his position in every trembling breath. A candle wavers on a nearby sill, and he stares into the molten glow, seeing the slow breaking of a flame mirrored in his own dwindling strength. Trust, once the lifeblood of his reign, has become a fragile filament, ready to snap at the faintest tremor. He recalls the faces of enemies who smiled too broadly, allies who lingered too long in the corridors, the subtle tension in the air that he once ignored. Each of these small omens now feels monumental, a warning etched into the very bones of the castle. He rises slowly, every movement deliberate, feeling the years press down upon him, yet knowing action must follow thought, even in a body weakened by age. The throne room stretches around him, vast, cold, a silent witness to the decay of power. Moonlight catches the edges of his gaunt face, highlighting the hollows beneath tired eyes. He moves toward the window, fingers brushing the cold stone, tracing the sharp contours of the fortress that has been both sanctuary and prison. The mountains beyond stand silent and eternal, uncaring, watching the flickering human struggle below. The king's thoughts drift to the future, a horizon shrouded in shadow, where the outcome rests not in his hands, but in the currents of ambition, loyalty, and fear. He imagines the first strike of betrayal, subtle, unannounced, a dagger hidden in words or promises. The fortress holds, for now, but its stones remember every secret, every whisper, every hesitation. The wind rattles the banners again, and in that sound, he hears the echo of what is to come. The slow, deliberate breaking of trust, the extinguishing of light, the birth of sorrow. And in that quiet, he feels the pulse of inevitability, a rhythm as relentless as the tolling bell, as silent and certain as frost creeping over stone. The king, ancient and wearied, places his hand on the arm of his throne one final time and exhales, letting the night carry his fears across the fortress walls. Shadows lengthen, the owl's cry fades, and the first note of an inevitable fall drifts on the cold wind. A somber melody that promises fire, betrayal, and the fragile death of a kingdom held together by fragile human hands. The candle flickers once more before dimming, leaving only the silver light of the moon to trace the jagged contours of the fortress. The king's gaze lingers on the distant horizon, on the mountains and the empty streets, knowing that the coming dawn will bring choices, consequences, and the slow unraveling of all he has known. And in the silence that follows, a single question lingers, suspended over the stone and shadow. Who will survive when the chains of loyalty finally snap, and what price will the kingdom pay for the sins of men who dared to whisper in the dark? The marketplace awakens slowly, like a creature stretching from a long, dreamless night. Mist coils around the crooked rooftops, curling through the narrow streets and slipping between the legs of early risers. The scent of fresh bread rises in pale, uneven columns from ovens still warm with yesterday's embers, mingling with the bitter tang of iron that seeps from the hammering smithies. Every breath tastes of industry and danger, as if the air itself carries whispers of ambition and deceit. A young prince moves among the stalls, his cloak heavy with dew, its fabric brushing against the rough wood and canvas of the merchants' displays. He is unnoticed, a shadow within shadows, yet every glance cast his way is sharp, wary, loaded with the unspoken knowledge of what power can demand and destroy. Old women clutch their wares tighter. Stall holders pause mid-sentence, eyes flicking, noting the carriage of this boy who does not yet wear his weight, who has not yet learned the language of kings but already attracts its scrutiny. The stones beneath his boots are slick with morning dew. Each step echoes across the empty spaces, as if the very ground is aware of his presence and remembers the countless princes who have walked here before, some vanishing into history's hungry mouth. It is a soft treachery, this morning calm. One misstep, one misplaced word, and the world could turn on him. He remembers lessons given in gilded chambers, the cadence of diplomacy, voices warm and comforting, yet carrying hidden barbs. A compliment might conceal a challenge. A nod might disguise a dagger. The rhythm of such words is not innocent. It is a melody designed to ensnare, a music whose beauty masks cruelty. His eyes linger on the castle beyond the market, its towers half swallowed by fog. Tapestries hang from stone walls, sagging and faded, their colors muted by years of neglect. Scenes of valor and conquest, long departed from memory, trace ghostly outlines across the fabric. Here, heroes are as lifeless as the threads that tell their stories, and yet the boy feels the weight of expectation pressing down like the fog itself. Each heroic figure is a mirror of what is demanded from him, though he is yet unshaped by the knife of necessity. A rustle interrupts his thoughts. A cat slinks between barrels, its fur slicked by the morning damp, eyes bright and calculating. For a heartbeat, it is the only thing free in the marketplace, moving without allegiance, without fear, a creature whose survival depends solely on wit and agility. The prince envies it, longing for such simplicity, for the freedom that comes without legacy, without crown. Yet his fingers brush a worn coin in his pocket, heavy with metal and meaning. Its edges are smooth from countless exchanges, and within its copper body is the weight of inheritance and obligation. He will never touch life lightly. Every decision will ripple outward, every movement measured, every smile and frown observed and recorded. From the city gate, a black crow alights, wings folding with a quiet authority. Its eyes glint, and the boy imagines it sees straight into hearts heavy with suspicion, pecking at the thin veil of civility that covers human greed and fear. The marketplace stirs. Cartwheels clatter. The cry of merchants rises and falls. The whisper of cloaks flutters across cobblestones. Each sound carries a lesson. Here, vigilance is a language. A stumble can be fatal. An unguarded glance can unravel a life. The violence of the court is not distant, not abstract. It hovers at the edges of this very street, waiting to bloom in the wrong moment, to claim the naive and the proud alike. The boy pauses, senses stretching outward, tasting the fog, listening to the symphony of careful movements. He recalls the faces at his last lesson, mentors speaking in honeyed tones, delivering wisdom that smelled of incense but concealed the sting of truth. A king's life is a web, they said, and each step is a thread. Step wrongly, and you unravel yourself before you even know danger exists. The marketplace is such a web, and the prince feels its vibrations in his chest, a rhythm that thrums with both promise and threat. In the distance, a blacksmith hammers a horseshoe, sparks leaping like fireflies, bright against the gray morning. Each strike is a punctuation in the language of survival. The prince watches the arcs of molten metal, understanding that strength is forged in repetition, in endurance, in quiet mastery of small, cruel tasks. Here is a lesson for every prince. Power is hammered from the mundane, from patience and precision, from the ability to endure heat and pressure without cracking. A merchant haggles over onions, his voice high and shrill. Yet behind the squabble is a subtle art, a manipulation the boy can sense but cannot yet name. The rhythm of commerce mirrors the rhythm of courts. Negotiation, deception, restraint. Words are never what they seem. A bargain contains a bargain within it. A smile hides calculation. And he, young and learning, walks carefully among these currents, feeling the undercurrent of ambition that runs through every hand extended, every coin passed. He notices a child chasing a stray dog, laughter tearing a hole in the morning's solemnity. For a fleeting instant, the world seems to pause, as if innocence could bloom even here. But the sound is swallowed quickly by the clatter of a cart, by the cry of a hawker calling fresh bread. The boy feels a pang of longing, a taste of what life might have been outside the unrelenting gaze of legacy. He is reminded that moments of joy are fragile, that safety is temporary, and that vigilance is eternal. The air grows heavier with smoke from a nearby forge. Its acrid scent coils around the prince's shoulders, mingling with the cool, wet smell of stone and the faint, underlying perfume of straw. Every inhalation carries warnings. Every exhale is a meditation on caution. The marketplace is alive, but it is no sanctuary. Every corner, every shadow, holds the memory of wronged men and women, of thieves, of spies, of those who vanished into the folds of city streets or court intrigue. The prince knows that to inherit a crown is to inherit all of this. The fear, the treachery, the fragile alliances woven through commerce, loyalty, and blood. A sudden cry, a woman shouting for a child, ripples through the stalls and the boy freezes. His pulse quickens. The world is never still. Even in the quietest hours, sound carries meaning, intention, threat. The crow shifts atop the gate, wings stretching, and for a heartbeat, it seems as if it might descend into the marketplace, as if to remind him that the watchful eye sees all. The prince tucks the coin deeper into his pocket, fingers brushing the cold metal as if to anchor himself. He steps forward again, slow and measured, feeling the pulse of the city beneath his feet, the invisible tangle of ambition and fear that binds every soul around him. He senses that kingship is less a seat than a trap, more a labyrinth than a throne, where every choice, every glance, every whisper may become a chain, every kindness may conceal a blade. And as the morning sun begins to burn through the mist, scattering light across the slick stones, the boy lifts his head, eyes fixed on the castle towers looming beyond the marketplace. He understands that the world of kings is a delicate web, and that to move unguarded is to court ruin. Yet even in this awareness, a spark of resolve burns, a promise to endure, to learn, to navigate the shadows until he can stand unbroken. The marketplace exhales, the city stirs, and in that breath lies a lesson both cruel and necessary. Vigilance is life, observation is power, and destiny waits for no one. He walks on, the rustle of his cloak merging with the whisper of the crowd, each step a silent negotiation with fate. The fog begins to lift, revealing the sharp edges of towers and walls, yet the shadows linger, long and patient. The prince feels their weight, feels the quiet insistence that one day, these lessons will define him, shape him, demand from him the courage he has yet to summon. And as he steps past the last stall, the marketplace yawns behind him like a slow, knowing witness, carrying the scents, sounds, and secrets forward into the day, and into the story yet to be written. The storm gathers over the jagged cliffs, blackened fingers of rock clawing at the restless sea. The sky bruises above in purples and deep grays, heavy with the threat of rain and the promise of ruin. Lightning flashes far beyond the horizon, a jagged reminder that the world beyond these walls is as wild and unforgiving as the hearts of men. The wind wails, and the waves crash with a rhythm older than memory itself. Each surge against the stone, a hammer pounding on the fragile bones of a kingdom newly born. Inside the coastal fortress, the newly crowned king moves like a shadow through the great hall. The air is thick with the scent of salt, wet wood, and lingering smoke from the torches that flicker in rhythm with the storm outside. He traces the edge of a carved oak table with fingers that are too steady for the fear coiling in his chest. Crumbs of bread scatter across its surface, tarnished goblets glint like dull eyes in the firelight, and in the quiet spaces between them, he imagines the echoes of laughter, a memory of warmth that has long since fled these walls. It clings faintly, like a ghost reluctant to depart, and for a moment, he lets himself linger on the thought of joy before it shatters against the cold certainty of what is to come. Voices reach him from the council chamber, polite but brittle, curling around the edges of power like smoke. Words are chosen carefully, laced with the subtle venom of ambition and calculation. Every syllable is a test, a measurement of loyalty, a hidden knife behind a bow. He hears the fragments, the counsel of men who smile while sharpening their schemes, the whispers of alliances that may crumble by dawn, the promises that taste of rust and bitter ash. He closes his eyes and lets the wind from the broken windows carry their murmurs into the corners of his mind, each one a thread in the tapestry of secrecy threatening to unravel his reign. Near the hearth, a silver dagger lies dulled by use, the steel catching the firelight and throwing back shadows that dance across the stone. Its presence is both comfort and warning, a talisman against those who would see him fall, and yet, a symbol of the betrayal that is inevitable when crowns weigh heavy upon mortal shoulders. He reaches toward it briefly, feeling the cold metal, imagining the hands that might wield it against him, the silent struggle between trust and fear, honor and survival. Outside, the ravens perch along the battlements, black watchers with eyes like polished coal, their cries swallowed by the roar of the storm. They observe, unmoved by allegiance, bearing witness to every secret, every quiet despair, every fleeting moment of fragile trust that holds a kingdom together. The king steps toward the windows, his gaze drawn to the sea. Each wave strikes the cliffs with a relentless fury, as though the ocean itself conspires to test the limits of his resolve. Foam sprays into the storm-blown wind, dampening the stone and his senses alike. He inhales the scent of wet rock and salt, a mixture that has accompanied rulers and warriors before him, and feels the weight of history pressing down. Here, where ancestors once carved their names into stone, where the blood of the fallen stains the battlements, he senses the lineage of power and its inevitable decay. Each generation, he thinks, is a candle against the night, flickering bravely, then snuffed by the chaos that surrounds it. Inside, the hall is a stage of shadows. Torches tremble in the wind that slips through the cracks, stretching dark fingers across the walls, coiling around the tapestries and the empty seats where nobles should sit. The light plays upon carved faces in the wood, grotesque and watchful, as if the past itself leans forward to witness the drama unfolding. The king moves among them, feeling the tension coil like a serpent in his chest. Every glance carries suspicion. Every gesture might conceal a dagger. Every silence is a threat. He wonders if the men who kneel before him understand the weight of what they swear allegiance to, or if their loyalty is as fleeting as the shadows dancing at their feet. A sudden crash of thunder shakes the hall. The king's hand tightens around the edge of the table, knuckles whitening. The storm mirrors the turmoil inside these walls, the betrayal, the hunger for power, the unspoken vendettas that stretch back through generations. He sees it in the eyes of his advisors, in the twitch of a lip, the hesitation of a bow, the careful avoidance of his gaze. Trust is currency in a realm built on fear, yet it is spent too easily, hoarded too rarely. And he knows, with a chilling clarity, that his reign, as bright and promising as it once felt, stands on the knife's edge of ruin. He walks past the remnants of a feast long decayed into memory. Spilled wine congealing in dark pools, bread hard and lifeless beneath the weight of forgotten hands. It is a reminder that sustenance is fleeting, that abundance is a fragile illusion, and that kings, for all their power, are merely men who cling to fleeting moments before the world demands payment. He remembers the faces of those who have fallen before him, their ambition, their loyalty, their fear. Each was certain of their path, each believed in the permanence of their grasp, and each was undone by the inevitability of human frailty. He feels the same chill that must have crept along the spines of his forebears in the dead of night, when the wind howled like a chorus of lost souls and the stones of the fortress seemed to whisper of doom yet to come. In the flickering firelight, the silver dagger glints once more. It calls to him not with words, but with the weight of possibility. To defend, to strike, to survive. He does not flinch, does not reach, but the knowledge sits heavy in his chest. To rule is to invite betrayal, and to survive is to know it before it comes. The ravens cry again, a single note of warning carried across the battlements, as if the storm itself is an omen. He inhales, feeling the smoke of torches mingle with the scent of wet stone and salt, grounding him, reminding him of the present, of the fragile thread upon which all of power balances. And in this quiet terror, he senses the slow unraveling of his reign. Each heartbeat is a drum of inevitability, each glance a prelude to confrontation. He imagines the descent, the loss, the violence that will stain these walls. And yet, beneath the dread, there is a fragile, trembling hope, the possibility that courage and cunning, honor and mercy, might yet bind this kingdom together against the storm. The night outside, the storm, the waves, the wind. They are all witnesses to a struggle that will define not only him, but all who dwell within these walls. The king steps back from the window, letting the cold wind touch his face, letting the scent of salt and rain wash over him. He moves silently through the hall once more, tracing the path between shadows and firelight, each step measured, deliberate, aware that the smallest miscalculation could be his undoing. And as he pauses before the hearth, eyes drawn to the silver dagger lying in patient stillness, he knows that the next hours, the next days will be a crucible. Every decision, every word, every glance could ignite violence or secure loyalty, could bring ruin or salvation. The fortress is alive with secrets, and in the silence between the storm's roars, he feels the fragile thread of trust begin to fray. Outside, the storm rages on. The waves batter the cliffs, the wind screams across the battlements, and the ravens wheel and cry, unseen yet ever present. The hall remains quiet, save for the flicker of torchlight and the distant, low murmur of voices plotting in shadow. And the king, standing at the center of it all, inhales the scent of smoke, wet wood, and salt, feeling history press upon him, the weight of kings who dared to dream and fell, the echo of betrayals past, and the silent promise of those yet to come. The firelight flickers, shadows stretch long and thin, and he closes his eyes for a heartbeat, sensing the descent into chaos already beginning. A descent that he must meet with eyes wide open and courage burning, fragile, like a candle against the storm. Morning breaks over the frost-kissed valley, the world painted in fragile silver and muted gold. Each tree is a sentinel of ice, their needles sharp beneath the weight of hoarfrost. The air tastes of pine resin and damp earth, and carries the faint echo of smoke from distant hearths, where peasants stir under the stubborn chill. A hush clings to the land, as if the valley itself holds its breath, waiting for the inevitable fracture of day. Inside the half-empty palace, a lone figure moves with the deliberate caution of a man who knows the floorboards themselves might betray him. The once mighty ruler treads through long corridors where light and shadow wrestle. His boots click softly against worn flagstones, each step absorbed by the faded tapestries that hang like ancient witnesses. They shiver slightly in the draught, whispering secrets to one another, murmurs of plots long woven, of oaths broken under flickering torchlight. Candle smoke curls in lazy spirals, acrid and sweet, and the scent of old parchment presses against the back of his throat, memories of decrees and letters now meaningless in the face of shifting loyalty. He pauses in a hall lined with empty thrones of honor and dust-streaked banners. Each step forward recalls the faces he once trusted. The counselors, smiling with calculated warmth, yet eyes cold with hidden daggers. Knights whose loyalty had been pledged in blood, yet now shift like shadows, ready to betray for the smallest taste of advantage. Friends, companions through years of counsel and battle, who had smiled over goblets of wine while their hearts whispered treachery. Each memory is a ghost brushing against his skin, sharp as the frost outside. A cloak rests on a chair, moth-eaten, stiff with dew, a quiet monument to the loyalty that has vanished like morning mist. He runs a hand across the fabric, tracing the worn stitching with a reverence mingled with sorrow. Even inanimate things in this palace hold the weight of human ambition, the residue of devotion turned brittle. The king moves to the window, where frost etches the glass in crystalline arabesques. Beyond, the gardens lie quiet, each leaf trembling beneath its icy burden, fragile symbols of power that blooms and dies with equal certainty. Birds lift from the hedges, their black wings cutting through the pale dawn. Their flight is sudden, chaotic, a reminder that freedom is always at odds with authority. The king watches, feeling the tension of the world outside pressing against the walls. A cold wind carrying the faint creak of gates swinging open or closed, and somewhere, the deep toll of a church bell marking the hour, marking duty, marking inevitable violence. Sound here is a harbinger, every echo a prelude to ruin. He closes his eyes for a moment, and in that darkness behind lids, he sees the tapestry of his own undoing. Faces shift in the gloom, a trusted advisor whispering with a smile, a knight slipping a hand over a hilt, a friend turning with a glance sharp enough to wound. Betrayal is not loud. It is a shadow beneath a cloak, a breath caught before a strike. He knows this intimately. History has written it in the bones of countless kings before him, each claimed not by armies, but by the subtle cruelty of trust mislaid. The wind stirs the corridors, carrying with it a chill that penetrates stone and bone alike. Candle flames dance in protest, their shadows stretching across the walls like the fingers of unseen conspirators. He senses the slow approach of ruin, a rhythm inevitable and cruel, choreographed through centuries of ambition and fear. Each heartbeat is a metronome counting the steps of betrayal. Even silence is not peace here. It is the quiet before the storm, a tension that tightens the chest and chills the marrow. Outside, the frost begins to melt as the sun climbs higher, droplets forming on twisted branches, sparkling like tiny jewels before falling to the earth with the soft sound of impermanence. Yet inside, the palace remains frozen in a tableau of anxiety and expectation. The king's gaze drifts from the gardens to the inner court, to halls where once laughter had rung and now only echoes linger. Every smell, the smoke, the mold, the cold leather of old chairs, becomes a messenger of what is lost and what is yet to come. He remembers the small betrayals first, the forgotten favors, the quiet refusals, the sideways glances that hide sharp intent. Then the larger ones. Pacts broken under the cover of night, alliances crumbling with the subtle cruelty of ambition. All of it converges in this frost-laden morning, each memory a weight pressing upon his shoulders. He feels the fragility of power as if it were a living thing, quivering beneath his grasp, ready to snap. And yet, there is a strange beauty here. In the interplay of frost and sunlight, in the hush of the palace corridors, in the whispers of wind and the flutter of wings, he sees the patterns of history unfold. Kings rise and fall, empires stretch and shatter, and still the world breathes, indifferent to sorrow or triumph. He wonders, with a chill running down his spine, whether he is merely another note in an endless song, another shadow flickering on a stone wall. The church bell tolls again, deeper now, resonant with inevitability. A distant dog barks, a branch cracks under unseen weight, and the palace exhales a long, cold sigh. The king turns from the window, moving through the hall with measured steps, his cloak dragging faintly behind him. Each step echoes the lessons of betrayal. Each breath tastes of frost and ink and candle smoke, and every heartbeat drums the warning that power is never still, never safe. He pauses by the central hall, eyes tracing the tapestries once vibrant with stories of conquest and glory. Now they are muted, frayed, shadows of ambition past. A single ray of sunlight touches the edge of a shield, highlighting scratches and dents, the scars of battles both remembered and forgotten. In that brief illumination, he sees not just ruin, but the inevitability of it, the slow, inexorable unraveling that spares no one. And as the morning stretches into the chill of late dawn, he stands there, silent but alert, poised between what has been lost and what is yet to come. Outside, birds circle, their black silhouettes a reminder of freedom's restless spirit. Inside, the palace breathes with history, treachery, and quiet expectation. The king senses the subtle shift, the first tremor of events that will sweep through these halls like a winter wind, cold, precise, and unyielding. And he knows that soon, very soon, the dance of loyalty and betrayal will resume its cruel rhythm. In that frozen moment, he remains, a solitary figure in a palace suspended between past triumphs and future doom, the frost outside echoing the fragility within. And as he turns toward the echoing corridors, a single thought lingers. Even the mightiest fall, and all the halls in the world cannot shelter a man from what he has set in motion.